call it Tenetception.
Tenetception. It totally was.
That's awesome.
Okay.
It was awesome.
So
Thank
David,
you.
you're in the shot as long as you don't come further this way.
Well, what if I go?
Do you want me to?
I'm in the shot. Oh,
It's a little bit.
you shall not
Like how it's
shot.
Yeah,
You
but
shall
I
not
don't.
pass. Wait, are you passing? You shall pass. My head will be.
That's pretty good. Actually,
That's more of an angle.
Thank you, Money Penny.
this is where Cam lies swimming.
Now I'm even smaller.
The way I should be. Franklin, go back in your shit. Justin is Franklin the Turtle. Have you seen that
Very
cartoon?
nice.
I think I may have.
We are at 5 minutes to start. Do you have everything you need? Yeah.
I thought there was gonna
We got
yell
you.
at me
That's
if
all we
it was
need.
5 minutes.
It's a video you want to end.
5 minutes from now.
I'm gonna yell you when you're supposed to start. But I'm not gonna yell. I'm gonna do it real nice.
You can yell. It's okay. I'm
Maybe loud,
excited.
but I'll be nice.
You can yell
I'm gonna
nice.
yell at that. You guys are too close. I don't want to hurt anybody.
So we're saying what we do.
You can just say Hobbit.
Yeah, you're also happy Hobbit. That's sort of kind of.
Yeah. That's what we were
Because I don't know
We
your
don't even know who
credentials.
we are. We don't know you.
They're
You don't
very
know us.
smart and nice and nerdy. Please continue.
Yeah, all you have to do is go nerds, and then that would be
With love. Nerds with love.
that would be appropriate. We are the nerds.
I think if your hands are up like that, David, then Alex's head is gone.
My hands
That's
are up
okay,
like
that's
what?
appropriate.
Like this?
Yeah, look.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
Can you do that just the whole time?
Oh boy.
This time.
Well, I think.
This is what I think. I think I'm David Baxter.
Yeah, that's right. I'm the biggest guy in the world.
Yeah.
Constantly looking at it. I want to be looking at the presentation.
I took my glasses off, so I can't really see anybody. That works the best way for me.
Yeah, because then you won't get scared.
Don't get scared.
Like all those gray chairs could be people or not.
Yeah, who knows?
Everyone could be hot dogs.
Must will be.
Oh, they're not.
Let's whisper.
What was it? What?
What?
Did you make it?
She's just talking about food, I think. She's just talking about food. Wait, did she get a band? She got a band.
You always book for 8. Always.
What?
And we show up with 12.
What do you mean book for 8?
We're talking about going to the spaghetti factory. I'll call them after.
Well, I want to go, and the problem, of course, is I have some responsibilities
Yeah.
at the time.
You're
But we
right.
were
You're a
good.
real
You have to
adult.
go.
I know, but I wanted to go to see Ready Player One tonight. 10 o'clock. Let's all go.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Ivy Jim Kitty wants to do it, and I think Daniel wants to do it. So, Terry wants to do it.
Have you guys seen it yet? You like it.
Yeah. Gandalf is in it.
Strong female protagonist.
Gandalf is in it.
Have a ring. For shame.
So, are any of you guys like book Tolkien people? We're all movie.
I mean, I'm not that
You're not
familiar
well
with
versed.
Right, you don't know the book's cold or anything.
I'm currently rereading The Two Towers.
Okay.
And pay attention to your lovely panelists. All yours.
Hi guys.
Is this thing on? How close do I need to talk to the mic? Right there. Like that. Hi, everybody.
Everybody's so far
Welcome to
away.
Dispatches from Middle Earth.
Yeah.
We have a lot to talk about tonight, if you've been watching the news. But first, let's introduce ourselves. We represent thewandering.net. We're a fan site, all volunteer. We've been around since 1998. We've survived many rounds of tech industry comings and goings, and we're still around. We reach about 1.5 million people a week, 400,000 followers across Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and we're constantly posting stuff, memes and breaking news, and sometimes people don't trust what we say. They call us fake news. But most of the time, we're accurate because we're Google News verified, and everything we post gets the official thumbs up from Google.
I thought we were Kafefi News.
So
Isn't that a term from Hobbiton? Kafefi? No?
Kafefi? Yeah, I think I saw that.
It means a very well-rounded pumpkin.
I host the weekly podcast called Torn Tuesday. It's a live streaming show that we do on Periscope and Facebook Live. And every week we talk about anything Tolkien. We've been doing it for 6 years, 300 episodes. And I've been involved with the One Ring for almost since its inception, helping with t-shirt designs and videos and podcasts and things like that. And we have an awesome panel of volunteers that help with the One Ring. Again, it's an all-volunteer site. It's the dream of every blog out there, especially Trunk. But you guys have day jobs. Like you know, the One Ring is just a volunteer thing. So David, let's start with you down there. What's your day job?
Hi everybody. I'm David Baxter, and my day job is I am a film executive at Legion M, which is I guess the best way to describe it is a film company that's owned entirely by fans, and we use a new law in the SEC that allows non-millionaires to invest in us, and we invest in movies and we make movies. And in fact, we have a movie that's going to be coming out on May 4th called Bad Samaritan, which stars David Tennant, if you happen to like David Tennant. And we have a panel tomorrow at 5, shameless plug, and we are going to be showing the movie with the director, Dean Devlin, who did a little movie called Stargate and Independence Day. So if you get a chance, come on by tomorrow at 5, and I've got info. But yeah, I've been involved with the OneRing.net since 1999. So it is an amazing group of people who are very passionate about all things Tolkien. That's me. So,
and David,
yes.
Didn't you just work with Elijah Wood?
Yes. So one of the films that is going to be coming out in the fall, I had the pleasure, I had met Elijah, when he was a very young man, when he was doing The Lord of the Rings. Now he is a film producer, and he just produced a movie called Mandy, which we invested in, and it was the best reviewed film coming out of Sundance Film Festival this year. It is a Nicolas Cage starring movie. It's a heavy metal revenge fantasy. Sort of Nicolas Cage at 11. He finally found the film that would put him beyond 10. So, what can I say? It is batshit crazy, but really takes advantage of all things Nicolas. So if you can, keep an eye out for that. Check out Legion M, www.legionm. You can find out about us. We are very, very Tolkien fan friendly, obviously, because of my love for that.
He's also a professional Darth Vader and Gandalf, you name it.
Oh,
so,
that cosplay.
you
I'm also larger than life cosplay. You'll see me as the Hound on Sunday from Game of Thrones. And tomorrow I have a body positivity panel with Ivy Doomkitty, and I will be dressed as, well, a mashup between the Hound and Colonel Sanders with KFC. So I will be Colonel Sandor. So come, if you see me, just walk up and say hi. I'm very approachable.
He's friendly.
And right next to me are the Happy Hobbits, Kelly and Alex.
Woo!
They met me at a random trip in LA.
Back in 2012, so 6 years ago?
Wow.
Yeah, and they did a reaction video to one of the Hobbit trailers, and Peter Jackson ended up showing their reaction to the trailer on set while they were doing reshoots, and filmed the actors reacting to them.
That's crazy.
And next thing you know,
Hobbitception.
you guys were like on all the news and late night shows, and like everybody at Weta knows you now.
It was crazy.
Well, the reason we filmed that, it wasn't just like a random thing. We have a web show called Happy Hobbit, and we're nicknamed Feely and Keely. And we started that 6 years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So old, like half Gandalf. But yeah, our show is basically about how to bring Middle-earth into your daily life through things as simple as the way you can make your breakfast more hobbity, to the way you can have chickens in your yard, or, I don't know, a crab.
Or Kafefi pumpkin.
Well, or how to make cosplay out of Goodwill Island, you know.
And then after this like blew up, you guys came down to San Diego Comic-Con and met Richard Taylor and the whole Weta team, and he kind of took a liking to you. And what happened?
I thought he adopted you guys.
Your facts are wrong there, buddy. It was well before we blew up. It was before Happy Hobbit even existed. That was back when we met you. But long story short, what I love about the OneRing.net and what I love about the changing dynamic of the film industry and the entertainment industry in general is that more and more often now fans are being heard and fans are being given a chance in the professional realm. And I'm proof of that. Other than being a Happy Hobbit, I'm an author. My pen name is my initials, K.M. Rice.
Go read Darkling. It's amazing.
I do have a new book series coming out called Afterworld. First book, Ophelia, is being released on May 18th. So I'm excited and terrified. But my Hobbit or Middle-earth backstory, or as a author, has been working on the massive tome Middle-earth from script to screen, building the world of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And I wrote that with the wonderful Daniel Falconer down in Wellington, New Zealand, where we had a blast, not only exploring Middle-earth, but looking back at so many of the props and memories and such from the making of the film. So as you can imagine as a fan, I was in paradise. And that was an amazing, wonderful, exciting opportunity that I got to have because of being in the unique position of being a writer and a fan. So like I said, that gap is narrowing. These are exciting times.
And to be clear, it had nothing to do with going viral. In case Justin gave that idea. That was all because of your talent.
No, I wanted to say that Weta Workshop hires fans.
Right, yeah.
Like, if you have the talent, they're way open to working with you.
And we're hoping that sets the precedent, for a lot of other studios who are working on these properties that have massive fan interest. So keep your eyes peeled, folks.
So let's get into it. So we want to talk about what are the priorities for the Tolkien estate right now. The Christopher Tolkien, his J.R.R. Tolkien's son, recently retired. The family has taken over. The youngins have taken over basically, and they're taking the whole brand, the legendarium of Middle-earth, in new directions. And so, what are their priorities right now? It's to enhance J.R.R. Tolkien's brand, and make him relevant on an ongoing basis. So things that they're doing is they're doing more stuff with Tolkien's work. They're building theme parks. We've got new books coming out this year. There's video games coming out, sequels to popular video games. And of course, Amazon is doing a series. So, David, what are the priorities of the Tolkien estate?
Well, from what we can tell from articles and so forth, obviously they want to strengthen what we call the legendarium. So, they want to highlight what Tolkien's legacy is. They want to show him as a writer, as an artist. Obviously, with the interest that the news about potentially doing a theme park at Universal in Florida, they want people to go to Middle-earth. I mean, they're really invested in having people get invested in all things Middle-earth. And ultimately, they want to cement Tolkien's literary legacy. And should we tell them one of the ways that they're planning to do that? The Bodleian Library at Oxford is doing a tour, an exhibition of original Tolkien art, which you may, be familiar with if you read the old paperbacks in the 70s. They always had his art on them.
Tolkien actually did all the art to his books. He did all the watercolors. He painted that cover.
So cool.
So Tolkien wasn't just a writer and a creator of languages, but he only trusted himself to do the art. So they're putting, the Tolkien family is putting together an exhibition of all his original watercolors that have to do with The Hobbit, 1937. This one here is all the liner notes that he had after his first painting for the cover, and little tweaks and changes that he needed the printer to make to match his vision.
And that's coming in 2019 to America, isn't it?
Yeah, so for the first time, the Tolkien estate is touring everything Tolkien. So they're bringing Tolkien's works to America. It's going to start in New York City next spring, and from there, they're looking at all the other cities in America to actually, art museums, to really, help establish Tolkien's art legacy.
And you guys have to understand that, when Christopher was running things at the estate, he kept a very, very tight lid on everything. And there really was not a lot of chance. In fact, after Lord of the Rings ended, a lot of people at the One Ring were like, don't expect to see anything. It was a really sad day because we didn't know, is it even possible we could ever see, someone film the Silmarillion or stories from Unfinished Tales. It seemed like it was not going to happen. Oh, and who can forget that conversation with Smaug, with the smoke surrounding Bilbo? That's how they did invisibility back then. Barrel riding. I mean, Bjorn's Hall.
This is all from the hand of Tolkien himself.
And the hill, Hobbiton across the water, we all want to be there. And you'll get to, in Universal. You can bet they will be rebuilding that.
That's a lot closer than New Zealand, so that's cool.
And so we just found out this week through an accidental Amazon listing, as happens, that The Fall of Gondolin is getting its own book. This is a small story from the Silmarillion, and Unfinished Tales, I think, talks about it. But the Tolkien estate has compiled all the notes, all the letters, everything that alludes to the story of the Fall of Gondolin, and they're creating a whole new novelization just of the Fall of Gondolin. And they've been doing that for the last 4 years. Every year, the Tolkien estate has been putting out new books. Last year, we got Beren and Luthien as its own story. Not just what we read in the Silmarillion, but expanded based on the notes of Tolkien. So the family's making a conscious effort to keep this in the marketplace. They're not afraid of exploiting their grandfather or their great grandfather, and it's not really exploitation; it's just keeping him relevant.
It's getting new fans too.
Speaking of relevance, what's more relevant than doing a movie about Tolkien? So yeah. Fox Searchlight, I believe, is doing this, right?
Yep, Fox Searchlight is not only doing this; it's done. It is in the can. It does not have a release date. Fox Searchlight is in the Nicholas Hoult business. I don't know if you guys know about Nicholas. He was a little kid in About a Boy, and then he grew up to be the Beast in X-Men. And he dated Katniss every day. And he's really one of the sort of most visible up-and-coming young stars. And this is very much a There are movies out like, Finding Neverland that kind of describe how J.M. Barrie, came up with Peter Pan. And we don't know whether they're going to really be focusing so much on that in this film. I think there's going to be a smattering of that, but this is clearly a love story between him and his wife, who's going to be played by Lily Collins, Phil Collins' daughter, if you know her.
We might get some Elvish singing in this movie.
Yeah.
She's got the chops for that.
Well, they were the source material for Beren and Luthien.
That's exactly correct.
His own personal love story.
Yes.
In fact, on Tolkien's tombstone, it says Beren and Luthien.
So sweet.
So it is his ultimate love story. It was his own.
But this is also against the backdrop of World War I, where he was an officer, and many of his experiences there, many people believe impacted him greatly in terms of his conception of Middle-earth and his fear of the mechanization of the world. There is one thing in it that I don't think it's real, but we know that it takes place in the film, is that his batsman, the person who helps the officer, is named Sam. So I think you're going to at least see a few of those.
And one of the exciting things about this movie is that it's being done by Fox Searchlight, who just had a huge year doing Shape of Water. with
Oh,
Guillermo
yeah.
del Toro. They
Well,
won the Oscar.
Yes.
They are the studio of the now. And so we're really excited about this movie. And we've just heard that the Tolkien estate has taken a deeper interest in this film. And so they're actually working hand in hand with the Tolkien estate to make sure the estate approves of it.
Right, because this is a public domain, because he's a public figure, so there's nothing that can prevent Fox from doing the movie. But, you know, they really want to make sure that, that everybody in the estate is happy as well. And I spoke with Nicholas Hoult, and hopefully he'll be able to talk more to the fans soon. We'll see, but right now they're keeping a tight lid on things.
So other things that they're doing to keep the fans engaged is re-releasing the soundtracks. The complete recordings of the Lord of the Rings soundtracks have just been released this week on red vinyl. In fact, that was a tweet today from a fan that just got his copy of the soundtrack.
Do you think Elijah? Yes. Do you think Elijah Wood's a DJ? Do you think he would like kind of do a little vinyl work with that?
I think he can now that it's vinyl. No, the vinyl recording, the complete recordings of the Lord of the Rings soundtrack is the gold standard of film soundtracks. It contained every music cue. Everything that Howard Shore recorded was in that set. And
even all the extended edition.
Yeah, like every little music cue, even if it was like 10 seconds long. And up to this week, they were so prized that CDs of the complete recording were going for $500. Yeah, like the complete recordings have been one of the most in-demand pieces of collectible for the movies. And so they're leaning into that now. And they're like, you know what, the fans want it, let's give them more. So we're getting that. We're also getting better video games. Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor is at EA. They put in, it gets great reviews, but then they put in microtransactions and loot crates in the movie, in the game. And it got bad reviews because of the loot, of these microtransactions. So they just announced last week that they're taking them out, but it's been 6 months since the game came out.
No, I haven't played it yet, so this is good.
Okay.
Yeah, and these, you know, the games are, you know, based on, you know, the past history stuff that you can find in the appendices of Return of the King. This deals with the Witch King of Angmar and the Men of the North. Celebrimbor.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just fun games to play. The big rumor that came out this week is that Universal Orlando is putting together a Middle-earth theme park. And it came from a reputable Blogspot account. But we talked to some of the people at Universal Studios, and it's true, the rumors are true. The ink is not dry yet, but they are really, really close to making this deal. It's separate from Amazon. So, Universal is working with the Tolkien estate directly.
But doesn't it make all the sense in the world with the success of the Harry Potter Wizarding World? They really did such a great job with that in terms of taking, you know, a literary piece and turning it into reality. I mean,
yeah.
Can you imagine what they could do with
What if you get to be the ring going into Mount Doom? That would be really cool.
That's exactly what they were on the roller coaster.
No, but it's interesting.
Yeah, you ended Mount Doom.
Well, and the technology that exists now, I mean, there's a technology, if you go to Disneyland, it's called The Void, and there's a Star Wars experience where they put you, you know, with these VR headsets, and you're moving through actual space, and you can feel heat. You go to a place so you can imagine Mount Doom very easily.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it could be really
I
cool.
want barrels out of Bond.
Yeah.
Floating a barrel down a river.
They've actually, Universal is already like putting together description packets of like, you know, what they envision for a theme park. It's going to be built on 570 new acres that Universal just acquired in Florida. The Tolkien estate has insisted on a 5-year, they have to build it within 5 years.
They've finally gotten smart. They realize that they're the ones who have the leverage, and they can say, you got to get this done. Because in the past, there were lifetime contracts. These days, it's all about pay or play. You have to, you get this much time, and if you don't do it, we still get our money and you get nothing.
Yeah, so the Tolkien estate is driving this. This isn't like, exploitative multinationals going to them like...
No, they're the ones coming up with it.
No, yeah, the Tolkien estate is actually going to these companies and say, hey, we're interested in building on Tolkien's legacy. And that's why they went to Amazon.
Bezos time, Gollum.
That one's not a Tolkien original.
That's not a Tolkien one.
No, but Jeff Bezos, as he's building, the empire of Amazon, recognized what happened at HBO when Game of Thrones came out. Nobody thought that a fantasy-based series could have that kind of, incredible fandom. I mean, once again, the fandom is driving a lot of this stuff. And he wanted his Game of Thrones. So the question is he going to get it?
Well, he's putting his money where his mind is. And one of the reasons we want to have David on this panel as an entertainment executive is that he can kind of explain what all these things mean. I've read a lot of blogs and Gizmodo and things like that. They're like, we don't understand what this means, but it's a big number. So
it is a big number.
So what are the hits? What are the beats of this deal?
All right, so it's a $250 million acquisition fee. This is just like to get in the game, they had to put up $250 million. I mean, there wasn't even a discussion until that was down there. And that, probably goes back to, these kind of literary art, museum quality stuff that the estate wants to do. They're not going to go off in like a party. They're not taking this money and partying with it. They want this to grow the estate and to grow, his legacy. Now, what they're projecting is that they've got, let's actually, before we get into the production cost, I do want to talk about this 2-year pay or play. They've got 2 years to have this thing in production. So if they're not in production in 2 years, they lose $250 million. So,
and this is a lesson learned from the Saul Zaentz deal that back in the 70s. Like, the Saul Zaentz company had the rights to The Hobbit from the 70s all the way up to the movies 30 years later. The family does not want to get in that situation ever again.
No. So, they got 2 years to get it going. There can be up to 5 seasons. And then there are spin-off options. So they can do a series. We don't necessarily know what that is. But then there could be spin-offs. And then the projection for a 5-year season is that they will spend $1 billion. $1 billion.
That'll be the most expensive
series of all time. And they got along with this the new line license to use quote-unquote materials from the Lord of the Rings movies. And
so everything that was created, whether it's like the aesthetics of the costumes or even footage, whether it was in the final edit or not included in the final edit, they have access to.
Well, I mean, this could mean that they're shooting this in New Zealand for all we know, if they want to use these pieces.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. Or, I mean, from my perspective, when I read Lord of the Rings, I had very different images in my head when I was a kid. Then I saw the Ralph Bakshi film, and that was, I loved it at the time. It was super cool. And then there was Peter Jackson's, and everything is different. So I'm excited about the idea that maybe they'll do something really different. But we don't know. But the point is they get to choose. It puts them in a very powerful position.
And we've heard that Peter Jackson has just been brought to the discussion table. So he wasn't involved in anything up to recently, and they're just talking to him now to see where he's at, if he wants to basically spend the next, 15 years of his career.
I think Steven Spielberg he's got like a Tintin movie that he owes Spielberg.
Yeah, he's got Mortal Engines coming out at the end of this year. Peter Jackson owes Spielberg a Tintin movie. But if Middle Earth comes calling, I don't know, raise your hand if you want Peter Jackson back.
Oh, okay. So there you go.
Yeah.
Well, we should also talk a little bit about who's involved in this and who isn't involved.
Oh, totally. Before we go, I just want to say, what we've heard is the $250 million acquisition cost, the Tolkien estate got $100 million. So what we're hearing is they're exploring opportunities with Oxford to maybe create the Tolkien School of Literature.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
I mean, what can you
I'm
do?
going back to school.
But so
We'll create up
this
this
first art show that we talked about, you know, they're starting to explore what can they do with that much money in the education space. So there's excitement.
Oh my gosh, maybe they could teach Old English to everyone.
Elvish.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was a philologist. That's what Tolkien loved, was languages, and the entire universe came out of that love and pulling those things
He's the
together.
whole reason I studied Old English and translated Beowulf, and you know, I love that stuff.
Absolutely. So, in this deal, there are a lot of interesting players.
So who's in right now?
Well, you got the Tolkien estate.
They actually architected the deal. Everything that you're going to hear from here on out is a result of the Tolkien family wanting to do what is being publicized.
As opposed to being forced to do it because of old contracts that they...
The bad
suckered
blood has
into.
been buried.
Yeah, but I think one of the most exciting things is the fact that HarperCollins is involved. It means there's going to be a lot more books, and probably, you know, illustrated editions, all kinds of things.
And again, they're not going to remake anything. They're not going to retell the Hobbit story, the Lord of the Rings. So all the stories that the show can tell are, you know, Second Age, everything between the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, you know, young Aragorn. There's so many things that, you know, I think we'll get into, but HarperCollins can now create a whole series of books.
Yeah, or graphic novels.
Or comic books, or anything.
Yeah.
New Line Cinema's involved, and of course Amazon. But what's really important is who's out.
Aw, Harvey Weinstein. Bye, Harvey.
Harvey Weinstein had a piece of Lord of the Rings. He also had a piece of The Hobbit. There were lawsuits with Harvey Weinstein and The Hobbit, but he is done. He is out.
It's not really Saul Zaentz. You can't say he's out. I mean, he's literally out and that he's dead. But his estate, he's out. And you know, and I think Saul Zaentz was actually he really tried and really did care about the story, and you know, gave it to somebody who, you know, Ralph Bakshi may be many things, but he is an artist, and he tried to do some amazing things, and he created images that Peter Jackson, in fact, I believe, relied very heavily on. There's some of the scenes from the animated cartoon are straight in
the
movie right there.
And importantly, MGM has finally been out of the picture. And MGM was the reason Guillermo del Toro had to leave The Hobbit. The troubles at MGM have been well documented. I think they're coming up for sale soon. You know, some studio.
They always seem to be up for sale every 10 years or so.
So this is
basically. But their contract is done with them, so that's it. They no longer have any.
Yeah.
That's great. Who knows? We may see another Hobbit at some point then.
All right, it's fantasy football time. So they have, again, Peter Jackson has just started having a conversation about this. They haven't announced anything about what the show is going to be about. So we thought we'd spend some time saying what are some of the stories that they have available to them that we'd like to see on the screen. Like, where does it go from here?
Well, to me, this is definitely an Alex and Kelly question because, no, I mean, your fandom is very, very pure indeed, and also, you know, Kelly, you've been on the inside. You've seen, you know, all the different kinds of stories where this could go. So I'm very curious what you guys think would be fertile ground for a series.
I am definitely in favor of New Zealand involvement, whether that be through Peter Jackson or whether that be through What a Workshop, because the people at What a Workshop are, I mean, not only is their quality shown through their work, but their passion. And there were plenty of times during the production of the Lord of the Rings films that these people were on board without any promise of pay, without even an official green light, and they were doing it for pure love of the material. And that cannot be bought, and that cannot be fabricated. So if we could have another production coming from a place of that dedication to the source material and that passion, you can't go wrong. You know, it translates on screen. So I would love to see a return to Middle Earth and New Zealand.
I mean, no matter what, you got to get Ian McKellen as Gandalf.
Oh yes, that would be amazing.
Well, look at what he said. He said, I haven't said yes because I haven't been asked, but are you suggesting that someone else is going to play it? Gandalf is over 7,000 years old, so he's not too old. He's got plenty of time.
That would be awesome.
You know, what does the Lord of the Rings open with? It tells the tale of the rings of power, you know, the rings given to men, elves, and dwarves. Well, now they can tell that story. And the interesting thing about the story of the forging of the rings and how he gave them, Sauron gave them to everybody. He was kind of a, what do you say, mischievous, you know, kind of guy.
Oh,
Sauron was incredibly charming before he was Sauron. He was, you know, he was the person who he was the Brad Pitt.
Wasn't he sort of like the PR guy from Morgoth? Well, no, you know what I mean? He was like the good face of Ultimate Evil. I mean, you know, he charmed the heck out of everybody, and he knew how to get at people's fears. So like when the men of Numenor were like, well, we live, I don't know, 250 years. Oh, but the elves live forever. So you should think about going over there.
Well, a more modern comparison I think audiences would know is if you're going to compare him to a recent popular character, he's like Loki. You know, a tall, dark, handsome, wink, nod, kind of mischievous, can change his appearance.
Are you trying to push Tom Hiddleston on us? I'm sorry, Benedict Cumberbatch has already established himself as the voice of Sauron in The Hobbit, and there is no one who would be more charming and more deadly than the Cumberbatch.
You know, another thing that we could talk about is young Aragorn.
Yes.
Now, how old was Aragorn in the books?
84, I want to say.
During
the War of the Ring.
During the War of the Ring.
Right. So, but in the movies, he's like 45.
Wait, he looks.
Oh,
He looks 45.
So it's reasonable to see a prequel series of Lord of the Rings to be hot 20-something Aragorn. I don't know, what do you guys want to see?
I would love to see, okay, now, some people, if anyone has followed what we've been saying all throughout the Hobbit films, this might come as a shock. I was kind of a Toriel apologist for a long time, and because there was so much vitriol against that character's inclusion in The Hobbit because she wasn't from the books, and I was like, no, I think we need a stronger female presence in these stories. So I was all for the rationale behind putting her into the stories, but ultimately, the way that the third film panned out, I was left disappointed. And she wasn't a character with agency, and she ultimately wasn't a character who had a massive or even much impact at all on the storyline. So I would like to see, moving away from that archetype of necessarily the action hero female to more Tolkien's women who were characters with agency and who were characters with power in their own right. And I would love to hear some of their stories told. Éowyn's a perfect example of a blend between, you know, a more mythic archetype of a, I guess for lack of a better word, I'll say a medieval heroine, but with this twist of, well, it's not a spoiler, I am no man, with the twist that, almost a Shakespearean twist, that she has the capabilities that none of the other characters can possess because of her gender. And I found that, you know, she's very empowering, and same with Arwen, but in a completely different way. Arwen's power is through the choices she makes, and the strength of her resolve. And then we have Galadriel, arguably the most powerful being in Arda, and she is as elegant and yet alien and yet human as possible. So Tolkien has written these incredibly rich female characters who we've only really scratched the surface on. And yes, there is a massive dearth of them in The Hobbit. There's only one female mentioned in The Hobbit, and that was a reference to Bilbo's mother, I believe, in the history of Bag End.
Wait a second, what about Lobelia Baggins?
I don't think she's mentioned in The Hobbit. That's not till Lord of the Rings, the Sackville Baggins.
I guess you're right.
Yeah.
You're
Taking the
right.
spoons.
God.
But he was a product of his time, yes, but there is precedent for these powerful women to have their stories told. More of them were told outside of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit books, so let's start bringing them in.
Well, and certainly you have the opportunity to do that if it takes place between
Yeah.
The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings with, Aragorn meeting Arwen. My gosh, can you even imagine that? Well, I guess we can.
Well, do you think that there's even a bigger opportunity if we go earlier?
Well,
The second age of
see,
Middle Earth.
to me, this is all about Jeff Bezos and whether he really wants a Game of Thrones. Tolkien, does not really go in for, he goes in for violence, but he doesn't really go in for sex, which is very, very, involved in Game of Thrones. And one of the things that would be very, very interesting is the seduction of the kings of men who were given those rings.
And that's the story of
the fall of Numenor. So that could be, also a way for us to get really far away from the things that we are used to seeing and give different characters a chance for us to fall in love with them and to see, what they're trying to do. I mean, the fall of Numenor, it's like Noah, it's like Atlantis, it's this huge, epic concept,
and with only a couple characters that would be familiar to us, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So there would be an opportunity
Yeah.
to tell this story and introduce a whole new set of characters of any race, cultural,
Yeah, they could do a lot more to restore sort of a diverse and explain that these are diverse cultures.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know too much about the eastern part of Middle Earth or the Blue Wizards.
I mean, one thing that's really interesting about exploring the earlier times is being able to, like, even if it's just like the first season, it introduced a bunch of characters we're not familiar with, so we're not comparing, like, that's not the Samwise I remember.
Yeah.
It's like that's just what fans do, right? Like they want to. You'll compare immediately to The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. But if you start the series in a time and place like this, it kind of resets the map.
I think it's important too to remember the power of storytelling, and Tolkien was a master storyteller. In my opinion, this does not have to be the next Game of Thrones. It doesn't have to have necessarily anything remotely in common with Game of Thrones. Yes, Tolkien told violent stories. No, he didn't tell sexual stories. He was more a product of the Victorian era, and he was more in favor of courtly love. And I don't necessarily think that has to be a limiting factor. I think the scope of human emotion, and I'm saying human emotion, I mean dwarves and elves, and the scope of the human experience is vast, and it doesn't have to be all shock and awe. I think that he was a man who would appreciate more of the subtler sensibilities to be told through interpersonal stories, and then expanded out into these massive epic landscapes of the battle for Middle Earth.
Well, and he was inspirational. I mean, that's the whole thing, is he looked to what are the greatest qualities in humans and non-humans. And how could people come together instead of being divided. His stories are so relevant to the world we live in now.
Well, and I think his use of archetype, I think his use of hearkening back to the mythologies that have influenced all of Western culture, whether we are familiar with the stories or not. The story of Beowulf and, oh my gosh, I'm blanking, the Kalevala, and he was trying to create a mythology for England that did not exist. But through his use of these archetypes, he created a world that feels so real. I mean, look at all of us here in this room. we're all here because this place feels like home to us. It speaks to us. And I guarantee you every single one of us will have a different reason why we're drawn to Tolkien and to Middle-earth. But he has tapped into something universal that, bridges language differences and the differences of culture to touch our hearts and to touch our souls. And that's what good stories do. And that's why I'm saying you don't necessarily have to have the HBO, let's open with a threesome, and then one of their heads gets cut off, and that'll be the introduction to Celebrimbor. That's not the Celebrimbor you thought you knew, is it?
That's Middle-earth, the soap opera.
So there's, I don't know, I guess my meandering point is that there is a vastness that is untapped that I'm excited to see.
And there's a bunch of stories that I thought we were going to get in The Hobbit, like a little more about the history of the Nazgul. When they went to the crypts, like I really thought like Radagast and Gandalf were going to explain to us a little more about that side of it. We didn't get any of that. So here's an opportunity to like go really deep. If 13 hours of each season, you can go really deep into the history of Angmar and how the kings were corrupted.
See if you can make us care for the
Ooh,
witch.
young Theoden.
What do you guys think about a whole season just about the horse lords and the
Oh,
Rohirrim?
Oh yeah, that
Totally.
Yeah, are there any horse shows on TV right now?
Probably like little tweeny ones. But
I
I have seen those on Netflix.
But isn't there a lot of story and appendices content around where the Rohirrim went, how everyone became Gandalf became friends with the horse gods and things like that? And
Shadowfax.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And didn't, after the War of the Ring, didn't Aragorn jump on a horse and with the Rohirrim and go finish off the war? Something like that? I don't know.
Anybody?
I don't remember that.
Very possible.
So there's a lot to do with Celebrian, and Elrond has 2 sons. This is what the video games are based on. All the Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor games, they've leaned into Elrond's sons. So there's something interesting there. Of course, we can return to Dale and explore more of the dynamics of Lake Town. And it was a trading post. I mean, Lake Town was a legit, crossing of the worlds kind of.
Many different cultures.
Yeah. So, that you can do a lot as far as expanding on the multiculturalism of making a new Tolkien show relevant to new audiences worldwide. You can start at Lake Town.
True.
And of course, there's only a couple shots in the extended editions of, Aragorn at Gilrayan's memorial. So there's a whole story right there.
Well, wasn't there I think there was a fan film that was done about Gilrayan and sort of the rescue of Aragorn and how he got to Elrond. So
Yeah.
that's very fertile ground as well.
One thing that won't be in the show are the Blue Wizards.
Sorry,
They
guys.
still don't have the rights to that. Everything in the Lord of the Rings and the appendices, yes, but nothing in the Silmarillion, nothing that originates in the Silmarillion is part of this deal.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, so if it's first mentioned in Lord of the Rings or the appendices, they can touch on it. But if it was first mentioned in the Unfinished Tales or Silmarillion, no dice right now.
We've only got like 6 minutes. Should we do some questions? Anybody
Q&A?
want to step up to the microphone?
Share your fan theories.
Yeah. Tell us what you think it should be.
Yeah, I mean, we're at Silicon Valley. We want to, how can tech strengthen Tolkien's legendarium? That's what the family is all about right now, building on the legendarium between all the theme parks and everything. We got a question.
Oh, hi. I don't know if you guys mentioned this before, but was there any talk about Tom Bombadil?
No, but I was saying that over the car right over. I really hope that he's in
What you want to do is that supposed to be like a sitcom? Tom Bombadil? Kind of like
the parallel.
Cheers. He could be like the Sam at Cheers.
I assume that they could totally put him in though, because that's in Fellowship of the Ring. So
Well, and he's
Well, he's ageless.
well, yeah,
It's
and
totally.
but I mean, it was included. I guess.
Who's your
It's
dream
mentioned.
casting for Tom Bombadil?
Oh gosh,
Peter Jackson.
that would be good. That would be good.
Wait a minute, have we seen Tom Bombadil in the films? Because Peter
No.
Jackson's cameos in Bree, 60 years apart.
Yeah.
That man doesn't age.
He eats the carrots.
Oh wow, it's like a Stan Lee cameo. It's all the same guy. All the different.
You know what they should do is make one of Armin's brothers a sister.
Oh.
So,
They're such minded.
what do you guys think of, there was a big fan reaction about adding Toriel, and to, everything is going to be new now. Like, they're going to be adding a lot of new stuff that Tolkien never created himself. So, I think there's got to be a better understanding from us as an audience and fans of like, we're in uncharted territory. There's never been anything that Tolkien hasn't written himself based in this world.
Well, hopefully we're living in a time that through technology and communication, they can actually get a better sense of, what the fans are excited about and what they're not. I mean,
well,
Kelly, could we have, I'm very curious from Alex and Kelly about like Toriel. Yeah, she was a strong character, but as you said, she didn't have agency. Do you think that they should have been, more cognizant of,
It's
other
not,
people?
it's not enough to stick a pair of ovaries into a film and be like, yay! I mean, I already kind of said my piece on this, but Tolkien does write characters with agency, and even if you're not replicating exact characters, because he does, women do get the short end of the stick in Tolkien. You can't really argue with that. But that doesn't mean that in a revisioning of it, you can't go to the characters that he did spend time with and he did spend time building and create some more after that fashion. And of course, they can be action heroes too. But I don't know. That's just a storytelling bone. I have to pick with the third Hobbit film, less than a Tolkien bone.
Well, when you were writing the Middle Earth from script to screen, you got access to the archives at Weta. Did you see some of the character creations?
Justin?
Oh, we have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, hi. I actually have one wish for the series, which, it's kind of a two-part wish, but first of all, I do not want Peter Jackson involved, and nothing against him, but I feel like I've seen his vision.
Right.
And so I would like somebody else, and I don't know who, but who also is not afraid to take some liberties.
Mm-hmm.
So
Makes sense.
what is your feeling from what you know, people involved about, are we going to be really strict? Or?
A TV series is very different from a feature film. Feature film is a director's medium. Television is a writer's medium. So really, at the end of the day, it's the showrunners that are going to really determine kind of the look and feel and the way things go, because they'll have a different director most likely on every episode.
Does anyone watch American Horror Story? Like every season, they bring back the same actors, but it's a whole different thing. That's one exploration of this.
Well, what about an anthology? What about, coming in at different points of Middle Earth history, or having somebody like, Sam narrate things? He's got the Red Book of Westmarch there.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. They can basically
Standalone
start each episode as like Sam writing down the story in the Red Book of Westmarch. It could be Galadriel. What they did in the movies is Galadriel opens the movies, right? Like she's telling you the history of Middle Earth. That wasn't in the books. Galadriel isn't telling you that in the books. So there's things that they can do in television that they couldn't do in films or wouldn't do in films.
So maybe we'll get to see that vision that you were thinking about, which is, something very different than what Peter Jackson.
We have 30 seconds. Anyone else's questions?
Yeah. Any other questions?
Any burning questions?
Burning.
We have one.
It does not matter how small they are. We're all nerds.
Right.
About Frodo's shoe size.
This is actually adjacent to what you're talking about.
Sure.
Since it's a room full of Tolkien fans, I just wanted to mention, as you know, the Tolkien professor is doing great work, doing all of those things that strengthen the legendarium. Signum University, they do teach people Old English and Old Norse, which is pretty awesome. And they have meetings in places around the country, and they're going to have a meeting in Oakland in August.
Awesome.
So it's pretty cool. The networks are places where people can present more academic work like ones that they have in papers, and that's the latest. So that's local to here.
That's very
if people are
cool.
interested, you can find it on the web at Signum University, and it'll have information on the moods. So
S-I-G-N-U-M. S-I-G-N-U-M.
yes.
Signum.
Thank you for sharing that. That's
Thank you very
awesome.
much.
Yeah, I was so excited.
Yeah.
Because all their moods have been on the East Coast, and this is the first one that's going to be up here.
That's very cool.
All
Thank
the
you.
all the Tolkien fans are connecting on Twitter. The Tolkien professor is active on Twitter. He live streams a lot of stuff. The Tolkien Society is on Twitter. You're on Twitter. Everybody's on Twitter. Like that's kind of the main way everyone's staying connected right now.
Well,
so
guys,
follow these guys on Twitter.
we should thank you. You guys were a great
let's say
audience.
thank you guys for coming and being nerds with us.
And we're out of time.
A big hand for our panelists. Take all of your items with you and exit through those doors, or if you'd like to stay, we're going to have Trailer Park next. We will watch and discuss trailers for the next coming out.
How does this?
Don't forget your phone.
How does that turn off?
Oh, here we go.